Welcome back to the table, friends. I'm your humble host, GreyDM, so with me, as always, is my co-host and co-conspirator, Owen.
Hi.
You are listening to Tabletop by Night, a weekly podcast where we continue our exploration of Vampire the Masquerade. Tonight, we gather around the table to answer the question, what other monsters hunt the night?
I mean, there's a lot.
So, now that we've gone through so many of the clans, and we've gone through a couple of the bloodlines, and we're going to look at some things that are not... maybe not exactly bloodlines, but are also part of the Kindred world, the Kindred ecosystem. Before we start exploring the other ecosystems that exist in the night. And one of the things that we've briefly mentioned before, but anybody who spent time exploring the world of Vampire the Masquerade knows, is that Kindred are not the only vampires in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things that are not really vampires, but close.
They share some parts.
Exactly. Sometimes quite literally. And specifically, we're going to be talking about two of those things right now. Two things that feature prominently in many of the stories that get told. And the first of those are the Kuei-jin, which are basically Asian vampires. Mm-hmm. So sit down and hopefully we'll try to dip our toe in some stuff that apparently there's probably a lot better lore out there for.
Yeah. As with everything we've done, there's someone else has done it much better, but hey, you're listening to us.
So the term Kuei-jin is a neologistic portmanteau consisting of the Mandarin word for ghost, which is Kuei, and the Japanese word for person, Jin. It is a relatively recent construction designed to indicate the commonality of the undead condition through the Middle Kingdom. The term Cathayan is often used by Western Cainites to refer to the Kuei-jin. The word is borrowed from the classic name for China, Cathay. It is perceived as offensive by the Kuei-jin themselves.
Of course. We do not like that. Well, we're gonna keep calling you that.
Yeah. It is said that the Kuei-jin are corrupted descendants of the Wanjian, the 10,000 heroes chosen by august personage of Jade to guide and protect the universe in ancient history.
So the Jade Emperor.
I think so, basically. The Wanjian were originally chosen by test of skill and courage and fed on the ambient chi of the universe. However, they fell from grace, learning to feed off the chi of living beings and corrupting the tests of worthiness. Their children, the Jin Hai, tried to keep them on the path of righteousness, but were eventually killed for their presumption.
How dare you tell me how to live?
As the blood of the Golden Children cooled, the august personage pronounced judgment on his former champions. He cursed them to live as undead, unable to acquire chi except from drinking the blood of the living, and to exist in a brutal mockery of their former state. He revised the test so that the former heroes and champions were replaced by criminals and murderers who escaped from hell itself. Then he left the Wan Kuei alone to contemplate their crimes.
I'm going to create these monsters, and then I'm just going to leave.
It's like, you know,
everybody else's problem now.
They know what they did.
They know suffered. What they did.
Since that time, the Wan Kuei, the fallen Wan Jian, have developed a redemptory religion while occupying an ecological niche akin to Western vampires. There are many paths initially ascribed to Zhu, the grand Arat of the dead. However, the road to the 100 Clouds is long, and the Kuei-jin are ultimately forced to stay on the Wheel of Ages as history slowly grinds toward the inevitable victory of Hell and the rise of the Demon Emperor. So, what are these Kuei-jin kind of like? How much like vampires are they? In the Middle Kingdom, all creatures are believed to have two souls, a Hun, or higher soul, and a Po, or lower soul. In general, the Po is a brutal aspect of a person, while the Hun is more refined, intellectual, and impotent.
Impotent or omnipotent?
Impotent.
Oh.
When a person who has led a less than exemplary life dies, the person goes to hell. There, the Po and the Hun are generally shredded for chi unless they can strike a deal and find a way out. On rare occasions, they can. The body takes its second breath and rejoins the land of the living as a cannibalistic demonic hell beast. Let's go back there a second.
So you're going to hell and you strike a deal to be brought back to life, but get brought back to life as a demonic, blood-sucking hell beast.
Hey, I mean, if you're going to come out of hell, you might as well take a little bit with you.
Yeah, I guess.
If not caught, these creatures will go on killing sprees and rampages of destruction, which is why the capture and civilizing of infant devils is a crucial part of Kuei-jin society.
Mm.
All Kuei-jin begin in hell and then graduate to a mad cannibal in a human body. It is only through discipline and whip cracks that they can then move above that level.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The Kuei-jin are physically akin to the Risen in that their physical bodies are powered by mystical energy and that energy serves to heal them. Unlike the Risen who rely on pathos to power them, the Kuei-jin use chi. Depending on the type of ki used, a Kuei-jin body will have different attributes, ranging from a low energy corpse-like state to a feverish state close enough to life that they can create new life. Wow.
Oh.
Apart from being faster, stronger, and tougher, a yang-aspected Kuei-jin appears to be a living human being. Interesting. Kuei-jin are less tied to their bodies than might be expected. Because they are spirits wearing bodies, they can take an enormous amount of damage, including a little death that wipes out the body and forces Kuei-jin to seek out a new host.
So they can possess different bodies.
There is a subspecies of Kuei-jin, the Yulan-jin, who do this on a regular basis. That's got to be problematic.
Yeah. Well, it's like the, nomadic vampires. Why can't I think of their name?
Oh, the Ravnos?
The Ravnos, yeah. It's like theirs is like, well, you just can't stay in the same place very long. And theirs is like, you can't stay in the same body for very long.
Kuei-jin are effectively unliving ki batteries. They need and hunger for ki the same way Kindred hunger for blood, and they need no other sustenance. Although they take more pleasure from food and sex than the damned do. This sounds like a good...
yeah, so far it's not... it's like that whole ravening hell beast, description.
Well, it's got a rough start.
Yeah.
It's got a rough start. With the right ki, Kuei-jin can even withstand the sun for a short period of time. Ki is divided into yin and yang, which have both drawbacks and advantages when Kuei-jin imbalance themselves to one of them. Kuei-jin have awakened Po, which seeks to make them fail. This Po behaves like a wraith's shadow and can temporarily take over the Kuei-jin. As a result, the Kuei-jin are constantly struggling against a far more intelligent and wily opponent than the beast that bedevils the Kindred. Ooh, okay, yeah, that could be a little rough then. I mean, it's one thing when you got the voice in your head of like, hey man, you should just rip that person's head off. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the other one's like, I'm not even going to say anything right now. You're like, uh-oh, what did I do?
Did you hear what they just said about you over there?
Uh-oh. That's awesome. More importantly, Kuei-jin are creatures on a spiritual trek. They have been granted a second chance by heaven and must earn their redemption in this new life. To do so, each Kuei-jin subscribes to a dharma. Each dharma outlines a different view of the universe and the means towards achieving enlightenment. In addition to spiritual comfort, enlightenment brings strength. As a Kuei-jin advances in his dharma, he learns to feed off things besides blood. His ability to manipulate ki increases and his abilities can achieve new heights. So I have a good authority that they eventually get to the point where they can survive just supping on the breath of mortals.
I mean, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool.
So what do you do for fun? I like to go to Ironman races and I just stand at the finish line. Oh, this is great.
That's going to have a pretty lame 80s reference. I just get on my big punk rocker and I start singing, I Take Your Breath Away. All the ladies just devote their breath to me.
Freaking Police song, Every Breath You Take.
Yeah. It's the greatest hits.
I'll be watching you.
So would it suck to be a Kuei-jin like in the middle of a fight or something and you're just like, oh man, I gotta recharge my ki, and then you run out to like an asthmatic ward in the middle of the hospital and you're like, no. Kuei-jin are not created through the act of another like Western vampires are, and their numbers are limited and can not be easily replenished. Their blood has no supernatural properties of its own and cannot create blood bonds or ghouls. The sun is just as dangerous to Kuei-jin as their Western cousins. Kuei-jin, however, do not begin to burn when exposed to the sunlight. Instead, their flesh begins to rot until nothing remains but a putrefied carcass.
Oh, okay. I don't know which one's worse, honestly.
Yeah. A stake through the heart does not automatically paralyze a Kuei-jin. However, the heart is instrumental in processing ki energy, and certain types of attacks can disrupt the ki flow in a Kuei-jin's body. Vampires of yin prove vulnerable to wood, the element of yang. Conversely, a vampire of yang are vulnerable to metal, the element of yin. On first glance, Kuei-jin appear relatively uniform, as all orthodox groups accept the great principle as outlaid by Zhu. On second, the Kuei-jin struggle to adapt to a rapidly changing world. Western ideals begin to influence their homelands, toppling traditions that have existed as long as they can think. Key corruption grows, and the influence of the Yama kings in the material world is on the rise as misery and exploitation creep into the cities. The young refuse to bow before their elders, forming societies on their own that challenge the established rule. Courts work against court, the distrust between them founded in mortal feuds that are not forgotten. The numbers of heretics and akuma are growing, as more and more of the hungry dead become delusioned with the world. Such happenings symbolize to the mandarins of the Sixth Age an age of degeneracy and decay will soon pass.
So basically, this young generation just doesn't know how to do it. They're just a bunch of freaks.
Well, once again, as we saw,
it's the eternal struggle of old people.
Yeah, I mean, once we saw with vampires, if you give like a population control and then let them live for too long, all the problems of the real world get increased to the nth power.
Absolutely.
So since before recorded history, the Kuei-jin have been divided into a variety of courts that cover various geographic regions. The 5 greatest of the modern courts comprise the Quinkunks of China, but there are also the Uji of Japan, the Golden Courts of Southeast Asia, and the Green Courts of Korea, and the Infinite Thunder Courts of the Indian subcontinent. Unlike the relatively anarchic Kindred, Cathayans have an elaborate society and governmental system with each vampires expected, or more accurately required, to join. As a result, the training for a Kuei-jin is much longer than the expected training period for the undead, and the Kuei-jin are quite willing to execute any prospective candidate who fails their tests. In the modern era, this training is even more extensive to rub off some of the Western taint.
I love it.
A newly reborn vampire can expect to learn etiquette, politics, the use of disciplines, silent feeding, poetry, and elaborate kaja script.
Poetry and handwriting. Man, it's just not in school anymore.
This is true. Cathayans are bound together in Wu, circles of Kuei-jin mystically linked to each other, and a guardian Nushi. A Wu is the fundamental social unit of Kuei-jin society, and many Wu have famous histories. Traditionally, Kuei-jin are expected to join an existing Wu. Outside the Wu system, which intentionally transcends dharmic boundaries in order to promote harmony, Kuei-jin will also obey the structures of their dharmas. Each dharma has its own method of enlightenment and internal hierarchy, ranging from the extremely formal testing procedure of the Devil Tigra Dharma to the individualistic teaching style of the Path of a Thousand Whispers path. Each dharma is a religious school, one that is followed with intense devotion by the Wan Kuei, as the alternative is the madness of the Chi-mei. There are dharmas outside the fivefold path to Zhu, although they are considered heretical and are followed by a vanishingly small number of Wan Kuei. I really feel that whoever came up with this stuff just wrote Exalted.
I mean, really.
They're just like, oh man, these Asian vampires, you know what? I want a whole system. I'm just going to go talk about all that stuff instead.
We're just going to have all these different versions, they're based off of different parts of mythology and gods. And
start bringing in the stars, start bringing in the sun, all this stuff. Yeah, it is really interesting. I think that we could probably someday, hopefully, gather together some resources to kind of dig a little bit further into them. I think there's a lot of stuff here that is pretty interesting. They're also just really confusing when they show up in the game.
Yeah, because everybody's just like, oh, it's another vampire. Well, not really.
Yeah, because if you remember in like Vampire Bloodlines, like you have to go deal with a couple of them, and everybody's just like, remember, they're not like us. Don't expect them to have the same rules we do. Thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, so I mean, I guess they're kind of like a weird cousin monster to vampires.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they're close enough, but different in many ways. Yeah.
So it's kind of suspect that just like all Asian vampires are part of the equation,
right?
But then we know that's not true technically because one of the Zamisi clans actually went to Japan. There are like Japan Zamisi, but
yeah,
that is kind of interesting. So
would that tick you off though if like you woke up and you're like, I am a Wang Kuei, Shan Kuei, whatever. Kuei-jin. Yeah, sorry. I'm a Kuei-jin, and then it's just like, well, this doesn't feel right. Where's the slathering, ravenous hell beast? I'm just kind of hungry.
Yeah, exactly.
Something's not adding up here.
It's just like a group of them, like show up and they're like, oh man, wasn't that truck out of hell rough? The one of them just looking around like,
yeah, when I woke up in my bed.
Right, guys? Yeah, let's go get that key. I gotta go talk to that person in that bar. I'll be right back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're pretty interesting. And, maybe we'll eventually see some of them somewhere. It's a nice it's a nice curveball to throw your players, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we could have one in Florida.
I know, right?
Mm.
Some interesting things, some confusing things.
Yeah. It's really confusing things.
All right. So I guess that brings us to our second group that we're going to talk about today. I mean, these are a little bit closer to traditional vampires.
But terrifying in a different way.
Very close to traditional vampires. Dare say, composed traditional vampires.
Yes.
So the Tremere are ambitious in almost all their pursuits. And not only were they content to basically found their own clan and found their own antediluvian, sort of, they wanted people that could protect them. Introduce the Gargoyles.
Mm.
So the Gargoyles are a bloodline, loosely, we're going to call them a bloodline, known as the Grotesques, the Slaves, the Rockheads, the Runaways, the Freemen. Traditionally, they have the disciplines, Fortitude, Potence, and two unique ones to them, which is Visceratica, and Flight.
Flight.
Yeah, the discipline of flight. And it is the discipline of flight because someone with wings made of stone does not fly.
Right.
They just plummet gracefully.
They coast.
So the discipline of the Visceratica is the exclusive possession of the gargoyle bloodline and is an extension of their natural affinity for stone, earth, and things made thereof. So it grants them benefits of duration, and they can basically do some stone stuff. So gargoyles obviously are a long, historic kind of tied to guardians of places, monstrous things that fend off the monstrous things in the night. And in this way, the Tremere basically were like, yeah, let's make that real.
Yeah. That sounds cool.
Flight is a supernatural discipline unique to the gargoyles bloodline too, and basically just allows them to fly. So the Gargoyles are a vampiric bloodline created by Tremere as their servitors, although technically not a Tremere bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
The bloodline is largely under their control. So the bloodline was first created via a thaumaturgical ritual in 1167 or 1121 according to other sources. For the first several centuries after their creation, all their powers were in the form of rituals cast upon them by the Tremere. During those early nights, the original gargoyles came into being only in 3 variants made to fill distinct roles for the Tremere masters. So they basically made 3 types of these guardians for themselves. The first group were called the Scouts. They were composed of Gangrel Nosferatu hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
So these were made to observe Tremere's enemies and to report any information to their masters quickly and reliably, and would therefore focus on mastering the arts of stealth and flight. Then there were the Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Any guess what 2 clans they combined to do those?
I'm guessing they're ones that are very good at fighting.
One of them is.
One of them is?
Yeah, the other one might be interesting.
Okay.
So they'll sprinkle a little gangrel.
Yeah.
But they had to add a little spice on top of that of Zamisi.
Oh.
So the Warriors were constructed to serve as frontline soldiers, destroying enemy vampires by focusing on potence and combat abilities, which enable them to deal more damage to their foes. But you really think those 2 clans are basically the essence of controlling Protean.
Yeah.
So basically these things were walking weapons.
Walking battleships, basically.
And then there were the Sentinels. And so if you want to take that warrior ideal, but you want to pull it back a little bit and make something very difficult to kill, then you mix in a little Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
So the Sentinels were crafted to serve as glorified housekeepers, keeping an eye on their master's havens and areas of interest and protecting them from harm, which led to them focusing on fortitude and keeping alert from any intruders. In modern V5, fortitude can do some pretty cool things, including turning your skin temporarily to stone to shrug off damage. But like these things were stone.
Right.
Like they took fortitude to the nth degree and shrugged off damage that like Methuselah and antediluvians would be impressed by.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does one make a gargoyle?
Yes, please tell me how.
Well, behold, sit up, bring your chairs closer, little Tremere, and let's talk about the hidden ritual that you should not know about. A little warning here. This isn't as bad as our Samisi stuff, but like
it's still gross.
It's still gross. So the gargoyle creation ritual is a level 5 thaumaturgic ritual used by the Tremere to create gargoyles from the dismembered parts of other Canaanites. It is a process through which the first of the bloodline came into being. The Tremere ceased making gargoyles after the slaves revolted, which we'll go back to.
Go figure.
And as part of the Camarilla negotiation, promised to never revive the technique. The instructions for the ritual
look in our closet.
The instructions for the ritual have been hidden but not destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I love how like every chantry probably has that book, and they're like, you just leave that book there,
right?
As long as we're in the Camarilla, you just leave that book there.
It just looks like a cookbook, and it's like that's Grandma's cookbook. It's got some recipes that we're just not ready for.
Yeah, there's a particular flavor that we liked. At our command, it breathes. So the thaumaturge, with assistance if desired, takes various victims and sews them together into a single humanoid form, which usually destroys the minds of the victims being used. She then sews a sack made from an animal's womb, usually from a cow but sometimes sheep or deer, around her creation. The sack is then suspended in a cask containing an alchemical equivalent of the womb's waters or placed inside an oversized, specifically prepared female gargoyle for gestation.
Oh my god. Okay, that's gross.
During a period ranging from 1 to 3 months, the thaumaturge must periodically visit the gestating gargoyle to perform various incantations and blessings. If she is away from the gestation chamber for more than a week at a time, the fetal gargoyle dies and cannot be revived. Finally, the gargoyle either forces its way down the living mother's birth canal or bursts from its cask. The ritualist must be present to waft the purifying smoke onto the newborn gargoyle. Any other gargoyles within half a mile instinctively sense the impending birth of a new brother. They feel a powerful urge to flock to its side and when it is born, and lick the bodily fluids off its skin. Although this custom helps bond the gargoyle to its new community, it is not a requisite of the ritual. A gargoyle can be born in isolation.
Oh God, your first moments of life and someone's just licking your face.
Yeah, Tremere are the good guys.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, it's funny because, like, this is basically one of the dark things that Tremere do, but I mean,
there's a lot of other dark things.
I think it's very funny that you could imagine, like, some Tremere doing this ritual and just everybody's like, oh man, that's so wrong. And then in, like, a castle a couple countries over is, like, a Zamisi is basically taking, like, some legs and sticking him on a head and giving him a. He's just like, yeah, dude, don't mess with that guy.
Those Tremere are weird.
More body parts, more body parts. The flesh cathedral grows.
Let me go to my leg closet. Your leg closet's where you keep your legs. No, that's where I grow with legs.
So basically, in the 3 variants that they have, the Scout, they use parts of the Gangrel or Nosferatu to breed. They develop a dot in flight and fortitude. Their abilities focus on stealth and survival. The Warrior, which is Gangrel and Zamichi breed, develops a dot in flight and potence. Abilities focus on combat. And the Sentinel, Nosferatu Zamichi breed, develops a dot in fortitude and potence. Abilities focus on alertness and defensive traits. By devoting further years of research into the gargoyle arts, the thaumaturge may construct variant types like the hexaped, the liqueur, or the womb bearers.
That last one I don't like.
Yeah. So you make a bunch of those. What happens? They revolt.
Yeah.
During the mid 15th century, so I mean that's like 400 years worth of like servitude. During the mid 15th century occurred the uprising in which the bulk of the gargoyle slaves of Clan Tremere liberated themselves from their masters. The creation of new gargoyles was outlawed in 1489 by the Montmartre Pact, although the impetus behind the pact seems to have been the appeasement of other clans in preparation for the formation of the Camarilla, rather than any sort of overture to gargoyles.
So it's like you created these monsters and they revolted. Maybe you should stop making them. Nah, I still want to make them. Well, the Camarilla doesn't want you to make them. Oh, well, damn.
Well, okay. Well, it's just like specifically is like it's not any type of appeasement to the horrible monsters that are now walking around in pain. So at the Victorian age, at this point in their history, gargoyles have evolved beyond the need for Tremere rituals, instead having developed their own special discipline called the Ceretica. Viceretica, yeah. Escaped Victorian gargoyles are uncommon. They find the world baffling and dangerous. Their monstrous looks do not allow them to pass through the throng of kine easily, and if recaptured, they are inevitably destroyed by their captors. While traveling from Europe to America was not impossible, the logistics of such a task were not easy, and the few gargoyles who made the crossing found themselves in a world more alien than the one they left behind. In the final nights, gargoyle populations seem to be booming.
Really?
This has largely become older, free gargoyles are coming out of hiding to join the Camarilla. Because more indentured gargoyles break free from the clutches of Tremere, and because the free gargoyles have also begun to embrace more mortals on their own.
So what is that embrace like?
Do you just get the urge to like climb up on a building,
right,
like frozen in stone for a while?
Yeah, and it's like what is transferred between the embrace, like I get it, you're a gargoyle, but like how does it alter, what is it different between like that and a normal vampire, like what's passed on, like that's
sure. Well, I mean,
that's very interesting.
You can imagine that like because they often have a mixture of Tzimisce blood and Nosferatu blood in them, two of the heavy clans, and like Gangrel too for Protean, there probably is a metamorphosis that happens like during their embrace. Nosferatu are said to like basically go through a painful embrace that could take over like nights, weeks, even. I have to imagine that gargoyles are much the same. There's some sort of kind of like, but I assume probably thematically it's probably more stoic, and like they could probably kind of like become death and cold and stone for a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, geez, if you want some pretty powerful shock troops.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Like, I'd almost want to make a character out of one of those.
Yeah, and that'd be kind of cool.
That would be cool, because it's like the whole thing is like you don't really belong with any of the clans, but like they're the closest thing you have. I mean, there's still like your gargoyle clan, but like what's that dynamic?
Yeah, you're kind of living amongst the masters who kept your people as a slave.
Right.
And so you have this kind of sense of like freedom and autonomy, but there's always the undercurrent that like if things hit the head, if things went bad, like would you need to fight for your freedom?
Really? Right.
Not to mention you're just inherently going to people are going to want to use you for what you can do. Not to mention like I do not have information on their specific
I'm sure
discipline because
it's
gone.
Yeah.
Like they're not in V5. And when it's reimagined, I'm sure it'll be like kind of variants on Protean.
Right.
But like I could imagine what I would want to give them. Like the ability, like instead of sleeping in the ground, to actually like,
well, it's like the gargoyles from the cartoon.
Yeah, like wouldn't that be cool? Where it doesn't matter if you're caught out in the sunlight because you
just turn to stone. Yeah.
Oh, like that'd be freaking awesome. Not to mention flight.
Right.
I mean, being this horrible, heavy, large winged thing that goes through the night picking up people. Yeah, there's something there. A lot of children in the 90s probably want to play that too.
Yeah, I would. I think I would enjoy that. Like I would want to do like the Sentinel. I think that would be the most interesting.
Yeah, just like I now instead of serving, like I work for someone, but I retain my rights.
Right. Yeah.
Like I can go away at any time, but there may be an emotional thing that I kind of need to do this.
Well, it's like I feel like, the Tremere would ingrain, like it would be like passed on genetically, however you want to do that in the ritual, but like their bane is they have to serve.
Yeah.
Like I have to serve someone,
Driven
something
to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. That'd be really cool. That'd
Mhm.
very interesting. Embraces.
Yeah.
Well, most gargoyles are not embraced, but rather created by Tremere using kindred from other clans, Nosferatu, Gangrel, and Samichi. However, the gargoyles are still capable of siring childer, though some free gargoyles have begun to do so. The process of creation is particularly intense for gargoyles, especially for those taken directly by the Tremere. Well, we know what that is.
Right.
The surge of competing strains of vitae combined with the magical energy inherent to the transformation serves to wipe away the pre-existing memories and loyalties of the new gargoyle, leaving a tabula rasa on which the Tremere can work.
I was wondering how that happened.
This process is a trifle gentler for gargoyles embraced by their gargoyles, who sometimes retain at least vague senses of their former lives, but even so, most of the past just dissolves under the occult onslaught. As for what drives a gargoyle to embrace a mortal, most times it's a case of simple obsession. There's neither reason nor rhyme to the matter, and even the most eloquent members of the bloodline shrug and put it down to a gut feeling. So it was their weakness. All gargoyles, much like Nosferatu, are hideous to look at, a byproduct of their occult origins, and the varied kindred stock from which they originate. This means that gargoyles, just like the Nosferatu, have to hide their existence from common mortals, as their mere appearance is a breach of the masquerade. In addition, the nature of the bloodline's origin manifests itself in the fact that gargoyles are highly susceptible to mind control of any source.
Oh.
This weakness is intentional, a flawed place into gargoyles by the Tremere in the hope that it would make them easier to control and less likely to rebel.
Makes sense.
In Vampire 20th Anniversary Edition, the Dark Ages, while they were still susceptible to mind control, the appearance flaw is replaced with a halved die pool if a gargoyle lacks any neutral connections to the individual. So yeah. A couple things that you could be besides a normal vampire, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'd probably have to these are not things that you would just come to a table and be like, hey, I've already picked my vampire. I'm going to be one of these.
You're right. You got to talk to your DM about it a bit.
Anyway, yeah. So as we were saying, both of these are probably options that you'd have to talk in great length with the DM to basically set up a world in which you can play as them. But they're interesting ways.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm intrigued. I would play a gargoyle.
I think it's a very interesting kind of character. I think the whole ex-slave thing is a very interesting dynamic to play with undead masters, because literally the person who enslaved you could still be alive quite easily.
Right. Yeah.
And then what is that when you're playing with that concept of you have freedom, but part of you wants to go back and serve, because back then at least the decisions were made and you didn't have to suffer the consequences.
Right. I kind of see it as a thing an errant knight sort of thing, where it's just I don't serve anyone now, but I'm looking for the person worthy of my service. And
then that person who kind of can't find anyone, but it's just things were so much easier when my master just told me to go kill.
And then at the same time, you kind of have that thing with the other people you're playing with, where it's just I know I'm easily manipulated. If I find out I was manipulated against my will, I will hold that against you.
I will do horribly violent things. Was it a judicious applications of violence or whatever?
Right.
Like you said, I think there is a lot there. I think it'd be very interesting. I think I would probably have a tendency of doing a little more cliche with the gargoyle. So I think I like the fact that you're a little more interested in that than I am. But the Kuei-jin are interesting too.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of, the confusion that would set in when a new kindred kind of has to go talk to something that just doesn't live by the same rules they do.
I think they're good as something to add to your game, as something the players have to interact with. I don't know how well it would be as someone playing one.
Yeah. As soon as you get really used to, the way vampire works and you understand all the properties, and then you go fight some, Asian vampire and stake them through the heart. And they're like, why did you do that? Now we can't be friends and I have to leave. And you're like, wait, what?
Do I look like a yang vampire to you, or yang?
That's racist.
That's racist.
We just all look the same to you, huh? I'm going to go talk to your prince about that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Yeah, it's this whole series of podcasts has put several ideas in my head of characters I wouldn't mind playing.
That is both good and scary at the same time. But it's good. I think I like it. I think that, for all the pushing people through D&D and for all that, like it's kind of payback. We have to kind of let that time happen.
You have to let me have my fun.
Let you go through the dark nights, and
I'll have my fun with D&D too. That's more of a slow burn.
There will be some interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that ominous note, I guess we're going to end this discussion of the other monsters that could hunt in the night. Someday we will return and talk about the more common threats the vampires see. But until then, we hope you don't meet any of them in the night, and you join us once again when we return to the table. So,
yes.
Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.